thank you very much for joining us as we cover basically Hasura and CockroachDB integration. So let me get started with a little bit about what we're going to cover. So first off, my name is Jeff Carlson. I'm a Partner Solutions Engineer Manager for Cockroach. And basically my job is to get to work with cool technologies and also how they actually fit and such, and enable my partner channels. And I want to point out one thing. I found the name Hasura interesting because it's based on a daemon. And then cockroach obviously is an icky bug that people can't stand. And so my dad joke of the day is really just that we're a daemon bug integration that we're covering right now. I'm going to move on to let my colleague actually introduce himself, and then we can just finish introductions at that point. So Dick Champ.
Yeah, I'm Dick Shant. I'm one of the product managers here at Cockroach Labs, and yeah, we worked on the integration together. So just wanted to talk about that today and what Cockroach brings to the table and what Hasura brings to the table and how together it can help solve some of your more challenging API development and scaling needs. And David from Hasura is also here.
Yeah, I'm David Melanie. I'm a senior product manager of databases and database feature connectivity at Hasura.
Awesome. So yeah, we're going to cover a little bit about what and why Hasura and Cockroach integration, as well as what is Cockroach, what is Hasura, dive into some use cases, and then end with a wonderful demo. So I'm going to hand this off to David with really about the impetus for why is this integration and what's the value?
Yeah, so why don't I start off by introducing Hasura. Hasura is allows you to build instant GraphQL and REST APIs on top of any database by introspecting the metadata of that database. So the models that you build will instantly create an API. And then we have authorization layer that allows you to create roles that allow for row level access control, as well as less granular access control like tables or specific SQL queries. And then what this does is really accelerates your API development, because within our GraphQL offering, we offer things like pagination, which allows you and the SQL we generate from these features, such as pagination, is kind of guaranteed to be high performance SQL. So rather than having a bunch of app developers trying to figure out pagination on the front end and then figuring out the SQL queries behind it, we really meld those two things together so it happens instantly within our platform. And we have quotes from customers that say we literally took what they thought would take 6 months of development and a whole team into just a week of development. And then within our product, we also have really cool features like subscription. So that's rather than continuously pulling from the database when something changes in the database, it'll just be pushed, which enables use cases like chat apps or anything that really needs like a real-time connection or streaming kind of workflow. And we're really excited to work with CockroachDB because CockroachDB is, Jeff will soon tell you, is a really cool technology. And really, your front end and Hasura is kind of, being this middle layer between the database and your front end is only going to be as powerful as the database that powers it. So Jeff, do you want to talk a little bit about CockroachDB and kind of the features within your platform that are we're really excited to kind of partner with?
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, CockroachDB is a distributed SQL database. So it's, we follow ANSI SQL. So everybody's familiar with like Oracle and such. So we follow more of a Postgres wire compatible protocol. Really all that means is we're not Postgres under the covers. It just means that you can take advantage of the tooling that goes around Postgres and utilize it with Cockroach as well. So we're really easy to scale up. We keep that pretty simple and basically think of it as a collection of nodes that form a single logical database. We ensure data consistency. So we're using a lot of financial applications, banking and such for that very reason. And yeah, one of the things that where our name comes from is obviously cockroach. It's hard to kill that bug. Everybody wants to, basically, if there's a nuclear war or some sort of apocalypse, cockroaches are going to be the only thing left. So it's a database that you can't really kill. In addition to that, so basically how we scale up this system is very much how we handle failure events. So that way you could lose one or multiple nodes or an entire region and still have your applications being served up and operating as normal. And lastly, we're able to provide the user with a local latency, essentially at a globally distributed database. And we've taken that functionality a little bit further and being able to pin data to a given region that allows you to be able to adhere to, say, some regulations, or at least help it adhere to them. So that's really just the super high level. If I'm on an elevator and I'm staring at you and I just want to tell you about Cockroach, that's pretty much what I would cover. So we'll break into what I would like to cover right now is just what is a more let's just dive into the use cases around Hasura and Cockroach, and what would be the top use case you would see.
Well, like I said, any kind of application development that you want to accelerate. And as far as like diving into specific use cases, and what I've seen really resonate with people is like financial institutions really love GraphQL and they love CockroachDB for two reasons. Like for GraphQL, it's the kind of two-way layer between the database and the API. So rather than having to develop a new API or download all this data and then kind of wrangle it on the client side, you can really figure out aggregations and calculations and stuff like that. And a lot of people use the GraphQL layer as a design layer to then make a REST endpoint. Or the most powerful thing, in my opinion, is to actually expose the GraphQL layer so that anyone using the API really gets the power of all the things within the GraphQL layer. And the cool thing is that with CockroachDB, the financial institutions love the distributed nature of it because transactions need to be really fast, and then also the resiliency of it. If there's a power outage or something, a node goes down, people still need to get the money out of the ATMs or make their transactions and stuff like that. And the really cool thing that's coming out of both Hasura and CockroachDB now is that we have these cloud solutions, these serverless solutions that are really affordable for anyone from like a huge institutional bank looking for an enterprise solution that costs, millions of dollars to a startup that's just getting started. They can now use these technologies and it's super affordable. And I don't know why you wouldn't do it at that price point, because hopefully your business is going to grow into the needs of our platforms, of the bigger features that we have, the distributed database features. So it really, I think what's really cool is that now you can kind of start your project and know that like, hey, whatever it grows into, I won't have to ever do a database migration again because I started with these two platforms from the get-go. Is there anything you want to add to that, Jeff?
Just that I was remiss in not covering the fact that, how Cockroach deploys now. We have a dedicated product, which is basically we're managing your cluster for you, or it's managed service. Then the serverless for those that have a lower entry point. So it basically scales as you grow as well. And then we have self-hosted, which is typically what I cover with people. But yeah, it's I think the trend towards seeing serverless to serverless is growing quite rapidly, as well as managed service to managed service is what I'm seeing in the market space right now with regards to Cockroach and how we integrate with something like Hasura. So those drive a lot of value for the customer, and they're able to take advantage of it themselves. Go ahead, sorry.
Yeah, like Jeff was saying, if you take something like Hasura serverless, and then you put that on top of CockroachDB, serverless, you sort of get this no-touch infinite scale system that not just your API scales, but also your database scales with it, and things like resiliency, fault tolerance, all of that is taken care of for you without having to think about it, because there's no sharding with Cockroach. We handle that for you transparently, things like that.
Yeah, so another point I actually missed to touch on. So what we've got to the point where I'm not seeing any questions run through, but if we have any, please just fire them off into the chat. But what we'll do is we can start moving into the demo portion, the flashy portion.
Yeah, and real quick, I'm just curious from the people attending, just real quick, I'm wondering, has anyone tried to do something like a distributed database on their own? Or has anyone kind of come up with a situation where they're like, hey, we need to add another shard of this database, or like you keep on hitting scalability issues? It'd be interesting to hear what people have to say about their
Oh,
experiences trying to do this on their own.
yeah.
While Deshaun kind of shows how our kind of buy don't build kind of solutions will hopefully make this a lot easier for you.
So there
There's
is a
a
question. There is a question in the. Oops, sorry. Go ahead. No, the shot.
no,
You
no. I was
were.
just gonna say
I
there's
don't.
go for it.
there is a question in the chat, and just so everybody knows what it is, they have a. There's we have an architect from Brazil, Eduardo, and he's looking to. They have a challenge to reduce the app development time from 7 to 3 months, and can Cockroach and Hasura help make this happen? So
yeah, I think that's exactly our value add proposition. And so I'll get your contact information from the webinar information and reach out to you. But that's exactly what we're going to show is that you don't, especially all the ORM code that usually gets written is really hard is really hard to write, and it's not like it's not a labor of love, so to speak. It's not code people really like to write. So this is code that you really want to automate so that you can focus on writing business logic and the stuff that's really proprietary to your products rather than this kind of middleware code. So hopefully, Dushyant, you want to take it away with the demo? I think the demo will probably help kind of show how we accelerate that app development.
Yeah. That's exactly what the demo is all about. So let me share my screen here. Cool. So the demo is really simple, but hopefully we'll get the idea across of what we're trying to achieve. So this is our Cockroach Labs cloud sort of control plane. You don't even need a credit card to get started to create your cluster. Especially for serverless, you have a free tier that gives you about 250 million, what we call request units, with 5 gigs of storage. And if you had a credit card, you can sort of scale this as you need it. You can deploy either on AWS or GCP. We'll go with AWS for now, and then you can choose a region. We also have an exciting multi-region serverless in preview right now, so you can also check that out later. And for now, I'm going to select US West. And yeah, you can set a spend limit. This is the nice feature we have, is that if you want to reduce your cost and say, I don't want to go above X amount of dollars a month, you can set that and we will adjust, make sure that you don't go beyond that. So in this case, I'm just going to use the free tier with no credit card and create my cluster. So this takes about 10 seconds to actually spin up a fully distributed database on a single region. So as you can see, it's done. I can generate a password, which will then give me my database connection string down here. So I'm going to copy this, and really quickly, I'm going to run this cockroach workload command. I'm going to load some data into our new database for the demo. That takes a couple of seconds. I forgot to change this. I think. And that does that. So then we can go to Hasura. I have already created a project here for our serverless. I'm going to launch the console. And in here, I can go to data. We can connect our database. So I'll call this CRDB serverless. We're going to select our Cockroach driver. Database URL is going to be the same. The only change I'm going to make is remove this from here. And I'm going to add a verify CA and then call this CRDB cert. What I've done is under settings here, I've added a environment variable that has our CA cert to verify that certificate authority. It's a one-time setup you have to do. I've gone ahead and done that. I'm going to change this. Instead of default DB, I'm going to talk to bank as well. Connect our database, adding the data source, and as you can see, the database is already connected. So now we can click here, which takes us to this untracked table of views. So I loaded this bank database in. We're going to track that table. Once you do that, now this table and all of its columns are being tracked by Hasura. You can sort of browse the rows, see what the data looks like, but more importantly, you can instantly have an API to go. So this is sort of Hasura's GraphQL Explorer. You can sort of build a query here. I'm gonna select things I want. So balance, ID, payload, and run this, and it gives me that data from my database as a fully working GraphQL API. That's sort of the simple demo, right? We've gone from creating a database to adding some data into it to just having an API without writing any code in the matter of a few seconds. I'd say about 30 seconds if you do it enough times. So that's that. Second thing I want to show is how sort of we deal with fault tolerance. So you have your Hasura instance, you have your CockroachDB instance, and you don't want to worry about what happens if my database node goes down, right? So CockroachDB is built to survive node failures. So to show that a bit better, I'm going to switch projects here. So it's hard to demo this in a serverless setting, so I've created a dedicated cluster, and I'm going to show you that here. So as you can see, I have the same sort of data loaded into a dedicated cluster here. And if you query this, I'm going to query all of it. It all just works as is. And if you click here, I have a cluster running. I have 9 nodes on this particular cluster. And none of them are, it's a healthy cluster right now, no issues. I am going to now kill 2 of the nodes on my cluster. So I'm going to kill 8 and 9. Takes a few seconds. And what you will see is refresh this a couple of times. Node status will turn unhealthy. So 1 of them is suspect, and then you soon see that 2 of those nodes are going to be suspect, right? Right. So at this point, the 2 nodes are dead. There are only 7 live nodes, but if you were to go back and run this query again, you're able to do that, right? There's no downtime to your application. Not only that, but also if you want to do a mutation and change data, that also works just the way you'd expect it to, without taking any latency hit, like nothing even happened. And Cockroach, you can configure how many node failures you can survive. So right now, I set this up to survive 2 node failures at any given time. But you can add as many nodes as you want, and you can sort of go from there depending on your risk tolerance. So yeah, that's sort of the quick and dirty demo. I'll stop sharing. If there's any questions, happy to answer them.
I'm not seeing any questions right now, but one thing I did want to point out is you were kicking off a workload generator, and that is something that's built internally that customers can take advantage of when, say, if they want to test the performance of the given database. I know you went through that, but that's one of the things that's built in and not something you created just for this particular demo. We provide that typically to it's out of the box behavior.
Yep, we have a really good Cockroach sort of binary that we can use. And what this has is commands. So yeah, like I said, fault tolerance being one of the biggest differentiators here with Cockroach. You don't have to worry about having to sort of manually shut up sharding across many nodes. It sort of reduces your time from going from sort of prototyping your API to going to production, because you can start with serverless, you can just add a credit card and boom, you're ready to go.
And on top of that is being able to show that as you're able to scale up the database as well during those events. So think of a failure event as really just us resizing the cluster downward, where it's going to show that there's under-replicated ranges. So that's something, if people want to know a little bit about what goes on under the covers for Cockroach, we use RAF protocol for writes. And this also works into how we actually scale up the cluster and scale down, and be able to still serve up requests from Hasura without actually seeing anything go offline. That's pretty much, yeah, so that's great. I think, do we have any, I'm not seeing any questions online right now. Just the
Somebody
one.
has somebody has a hands up on
Somebody has their hand. What?
the Mikkel, I think is his name. No, it's down now. So
So, David, is there
Yeah,
anything
just
you'd like to add?
yeah, I just like to add like some points about our product. We were kind of going over the like hooking up Hasura to CockroachDB, but like the next step of what Deshant was showing is like our access control features. So you can create roles that have specific access to tables, or the most common thing is actually to create like a JWT token and then tie that to like a user ID, so that like if you go have a user data table or user info table, they only have access to the information that pertains to that authorized user. And that like if you saw what Deshant was able to do there, like Apollo and some of the other like GraphQL solutions that are in the marketplace, they're more tooling solutions. So like if you use something like Apollo, you're going to have to write these things called resolvers, and you'll end up writing hundreds of them initially, and eventually like I've seen the worst case scenarios, people are in the like have thousands of these things written, because for all of those like in the UI that you saw, for each one of those kind of types or GraphQL types, you'd have to write a resolver for. And what we do is we don't give you tooling that helps you do things a little bit faster. We give you a platform and a solution that out of the box, once you connect it, you instantly get this GraphQL endpoint. So that's where like we don't speed things up from taking a year to taking 8 months. We speed things up from taking like a year to like taking only 1 month and stuff like that. And it's a really different new way of thinking about development, where you don't have to do explicit ORM coding, where you have a database and then a model for the API that you're trying to write to. We just
Right.
instantly kind of create that through metadata introspection, and then using the role kind of workflow that gives you the kind of API to database working layer that we've seen really accelerate not just greenfield application development, but for huge organizations that, now a lot of people used to have to worry about having 5 APIs, but most organizations now are like, man, things got crazy. We have like 4 mobile apps and 5 web apps, and then like all these third-party vendors we work with. So you have hundreds of APIs in some cases. And eventually it's just so overwhelming that you're working on just keeping the lights on that you can't build anything net new. So a lot of people look to us to kind of modernize their web or their API development cycle, and really kind of unblock people so that they can build what they specialize in, figuring out the special use cases and workflows and business logic, rather than writing ORM code, which again is just kind of a thankless job in the end of just connecting the database to a front end API.
Yeah, and speaking of thankless jobs, there's also thanklessly maintaining your database server, which you don't have to do on serverless or even dedicated, right? We do that for you. And you can just focus on building your product or building your application and not worry about sort of scaling it in the future, because if it works with 5 users today, it will work with 500,000 tomorrow.
Yeah, if anyone has ever tried, like in a previous job, we were trying to do a distributed database and had scalability issues with like, sharding the database, and like there was a whole team dedicated to it, and it was continued to still be a bottleneck in a pain point for us. So just like seeing what Cockroach is able to do and how easy it is to spin up is really, if you've had to go through that pain, it's really mind blowing in my opinion.
So yeah, thank you very much for that. I think one thing I wanted to point out was in the chat, Katie posted, if you want to get started with Cockroach and Hasura, and it's a step-by-step walkthrough on really just getting it connected, getting you to a point where you're able to take advantage of it, take advantage of the integration. So I don't see any questions in the chat. We don't really have anything. I don't know if anybody, David or Deshant, do you have any closing remarks you'd like to make? Or
Yeah, no, give it a spin. Hasura, no credit card required on their end either. Neither does Cockroach. So there's no reason not to get started.
Yeah, it's pretty. Yeah, serverless is free to get started with, so definitely encourage everybody to take advantage of that. But that's all I have right now, unless somebody asks a question. I think we do show somebody. Is there, so one of Carlos is asking, is there some tools for data modeling you could recommend?
So Hasura does have some data modeling built into the console, so that you don't have to get like a data modeling tool. Like I'm a little old school, like so I use Data Beaver, or but there's a lot of other ones out there. So if you go to the data tab, there's yeah, you can kind of insert rows, and then if you go to the relationships, that's where you can kind of hook up your relationships, and then there's a SQL editor built in.
Yeah.
So this is, I wouldn't say this is like the best data modeling tool, but it is super powerful as far as like when you're getting started and you're doing experimentation. You don't have to like switch to a tool back and forth, or like go into the CockroachDB console or something like that. You can do it right. It's right at your fingertips, which just like really makes it a lot easier. But there's a plethora of tools out there. I think, oh, thanks to Sean for adding, like Data Grip is another one. And they all have like pros and cons. It's really these kind of tools, the more you use them, the better you get using one of them. And they're all looking over each other's shoulders too. So if one of them has a feature, it doesn't take long for the other one to add the feature that the other provider added.
Another question.
Yep.
Yeah, so a good question is, what type of front-end applications would this be utilized for? And that's a good question. So Cockroach is a OLTP database. It's an online transactional processing database, and it excels at handling transactions. In particular, a lot of financial institutions use us for order processing. Logistics companies use us for similar stuff because of the transaction guarantees. So in fact, Cockroach offers the highest level of transaction isolation we have, which is serializable, meaning that you really don't run into data consistency issues, even in a distributed database. And yeah, it's to answer the next question, it's an open source project. Check us out on GitHub.
Yeah, and as far as like Hasura, because of the GraphQL and restifying, if you go to our documentation, there's also methods of making a REST API. Anything from a mobile app to a web app can be used for this. And as I mentioned earlier, some of our special features like subscriptions help you like real-time applications that like chat apps or stock tracking apps where you want to have like stock information that's up to the minute, up to date, and stuff like that are applicable. Our differentiator really though is like, rather than having like a separate team developing your mobile app, or like developing the middleware for your mobile app and your web application, this other application, we really like empower you to have like use Hasura to really scale out with like just a few people the middleware needed for the mobile app, the web app, the internal application for sales, like everything that you're going to need to do, rather than having kind of bespoke solutions for each one. Yeah, hope that answers your question.
Awesome, thank you. And very good questions. Any others that anybody has at this time? Because we're basically, we got a few more minutes, and I just want to make sure that
I just reading one of the questions, the one that mentioned what kind of front end applications. We do have support for data warehouses as well, BigQuery and Snowflake. I really think like CockroachDB is like the cutting edge, like distributed database out there for OLTP transactional workflows. And really the data warehouse space is like there's really cool tools out there, but we support BigQuery and Snowflake, and I think Snowflake is kind of the OLAP, like really cool unicorn in the space. So like if you were going to ask me what the coolest like data stack you can make, it would be CockroachDB and Snowflake, in my opinion. But that's another thing where like people are building kind of internal apps or dashboards using us on these CDWs. They also like analytic shops that have both like they commingle public data with proprietary data and stuff like real estate applications where like they kind of serve data as a product. They're using these CDWs. And what we're about to announce is a little bit of a not even public information yet. We're about to support remote joins. So that's being able to join data from different databases between Snowflake, CockroachDB, and all of our databases. We previously supported it between Postgres and SQL Server. I think we're the only two databases, and we're adding support so you can really federate data. So now you might have some data that's kind of OLAP data that gets aggregated in an OLAP system, and then you have some operational data in CockroachDB. You can now join that data into a workflow and kind of operationalize your analytics information. So I always say, like, analytics dashboards is where the analytics kind of goes to die, because a lot of times you look at the dashboard and there's like a human interaction that has to happen afterwards. Now that we have these remote joins, I really believe this is going to unlock stuff like automating stuff. So if you have an analytics dashboard that has like a churn risk indicator, rather than having a rep have to like go call that person or send an email, you can automate like a Slack message to that rep, or even better, automate like a nurture campaign that gets triggered within the CockroachDB data and sends them like a toast notification in your app or an email or something like that.
Awesome. There's also one thing, we added a link to, you brought up Snowflake. So we have, there's a capability within Cockroach change feeds, or basically CDC. So you can have data exported out to S3, which is picked up by Snowflake. So we have a bunch of links that we've put into the chat. So take advantage of those. One's about the integration, being able to how to deploy it, as well as all the other topic areas that we've covered. So really where we're at right now, I'm going to close things out, but I want to just thank everybody for your time. I know everybody has busy schedules and what they need to do. I want to thank David for joining us. That's been great and insightful. And Dick Chanth, always a pleasure, sir. And everybody, have a great day, and thank you very much.